This is a download from the BBC. To find out more and for our terms of use, please go to bbc.co.uk. Hello. Is the moral maze going up a blind alley, preferring heat to light? Its chairman, Michael Burke, mounts a staunch defence.
It's nice when there's a clash of viewpoints and a decent argument, so long as the vituperation, if you like, doesn't get in the way of some reasonable, real examination of the ethical issue that underpins whichever issue of the day we're dealing with.
Also in feedback, Radio 4 newsreader Zeb Soanes is about to make a lonely spinster very happy by reading this.
Ingredients: maize, sugar, barley, malt flavouring, salt. Contents may settle during transit.
And would you give up your favourite radio station for a week? We hear from 2 listeners who have. They tell us about their gruelling ordeals and surprising discoveries. But first, what is more important than the continuing slaughter in Syria, which has now spread from Homs to Hama? Perhaps the disastrous financial crisis in Greece, which threatens the euro and our hopes of growth? Or the continuing debate over seismic shifts in the NHS? No. Many listeners think BBC News believes the fate of 2 football managers and the death of a pop singer recently more famous for her battle with drugs than her music is much, much more important.
Natalie Donovan has the news.
Thanks, Rog. Good morning. Fabio Capello has quit as England manager 4 months before the start of the Euro 2012 Championship.
I'm Jeff Greenleaf from Kingsworthy, Winchester. The exit of Fabio Capello has been given excessive prominence in the news broadcasts this week. The BBC needs to recover some clear understanding of what is real and important news. The soap opera, which is English football, has no place in the main news broadcast.
Let me just bring you up to date on the Harry Redknapp trial. The verdicts are in. Harry Redknapp and Milan Mandaric both found not guilty of tax evasion. We've had all sorts of views in the last hour, not least that Harry Redknapp should be the next England manager.
My name is Mrs. Jury, and I wanted to complain about Radio 5, where the programme was absolutely dominated by news about a football coach who'd been appointed or something, to the neglect of proper news, which was happening all over the world. I don't know if you realise, but half your audience probably couldn't care less about football.
Just waiting for Prime Minister's questions to start. It will be interrupticus, I think. PMQ's interrupted, I think we can expect today.
Well, I think David Cameron and Ed Miliband would have to go some to match the drama of Redknapp and...
My name is Andrew Barclay. I wish to make very strong complaints against BBC Radio 5 Live when they decided to abandon Prime Minister's questions for some court case that had come to an end. It was a disgrace. I told them so in 3 or 4 text messages, and I told them that I would be phoning complaining to feedback.
The headlines: the American singer and actress Whitney Houston has died in Los Angeles at the age of 48.
Caroline Jackson. I live in Oxfordshire, near Abingdon, and they went on and on about it and analysed it from every single angle you could think of.
The BBC News on 5 Live. Police in Los Angeles have confirmed Whitney Houston has died at the age of 48.
I make no bones about the fact that I was looking for an analysis of what was happening in Greece and what was going on in Syria. I think that this was completely an instance of very bad judgment by those in charge of BBC News.
Mary Hockaday is the head of the BBC's newsroom. I asked her why the news about the England football manager's departure and the acquittal of Harry Redknapp on tax fraud charges trumped stories which many of you thought were much more important.
I do recognise that football is just per se a turn-off for some audiences, but if it was literally the resignation of a football manager, I think you'd be absolutely right, not really worthy of the main news at all. But this isn't just any football manager, it is the football manager of the England team, and whether you like it or not, the England team is a national institution. It's big business with masses of followers, and it's wrapped up, for some people, not all, but for many people, with the national identity. Now add to that the reasons for him going, and at that point I believe that this story does connect beyond to wider issues about the society we live in.
But Lou Gray would say, hold on, there's already a sports section in most bulletins where this story surely belongs. How does it rate above the murderous bombardment of Homs, the government's troubles, their health reforms, or yet more potential trouble for the world economy because of Greek fiscal policy?
Well, first of all, in its own terms, for me, it steps out beyond the bounds of pure sport, because you've got, I think, a very rich story about institutions, about racism, about how the society handles complex
but a
issues
top
like
story,
this.
but
now,
a top
to
story.
bring it, so that's in its own terms. At the point where you're saying why that story leading, not some of the others, I grant you that in the overall significance, what's happening in Syria or what's happening in the European economy are, if you like, bigger stories. But news is a moving thing, and news at a certain point is about the new. And for the moment, when Capello went, that was unexpected, surprising and new.
No, it had to vie with another football story, of course, which was the acquittal of Harry Redknapp. Again, people wonder why it was a lead story, but specifically Gordon Wright says about the interruption of Prime Minister's questions in order to cover that story. To think that the majority of people care about a football manager's tax issues and would prefer to listen to that rather than live PMQs is irrational. So who decided it would be a good idea to interrupt PMQs to cover the Harry Redknapp verdict?
Well, the editor of 5 Live, News on 5 Live, and I don't think he was making an irrational decision.
But was he right?
He himself would recognise that those are difficult decisions which will divide the audience. However, 5 Live has a very particular remit as a news and sports channel. It also has a remit as a news and a breaking news channel. And so the editor of 5 Live News made the decision based on the fact that this was a breaking story and a story of huge import for many listeners to 5 Live. Who
more important than the issues being dealt with by the Prime Minister.
The key again is handling the flow of news. What 5 Live did was start with PMQs, flag that then they were going to leave it to deal with the breaking news of Harry Redknapp, and then come back to it.
But would it really matter for us to wait 20 minutes to find out that Harry Redknapp had been acquitted? Instead, listen to the Prime Minister, listen to all the serious issues, and then when that's over, tell us about Harry Redknapp.
Well, the editor is very clear that this is one of those ones where they thought very hard about it, because of course, covering PMQs and proper coverage of parliamentary process in this country is extremely important for the channel and something the station and something they give a great commitment to. At that moment, the urgency of the Redknapp story made it a breaking news story, and then absolutely properly you pick up with and carry on with the politics, which is there for us day in, day out, is it not?
OK, let's move from football to pop then. And you make the case in terms of Capello that there were larger issues involved. I'm sure in case of Harry Redknapp, you talk about tax issues, etc. But Whitney Houston was a pop star who hadn't had a successful record for a long time, who was well known to be on drugs, whose death is not that much of a surprise. And yet, as Caroline Jackson says, you covered that, gave it priority. Meanwhile, Athens burned and Syrian protesters were massacred. What on earth did BBC News think it was doing? It's hardly a quiet news weekend.
Well, again, it was quite a week last week, wasn't it? Because we did have big breaking stories in 2 areas which we do know divide audiences. Sports news on the one hand and entertainment news.
But there's no wider significance. The point I was trying to make is what's the wider... Hold on, let me make the point here. What's the wider significance of the death of Whitney Houston? You've made an argument for a wider significance of Capello's resignation, but what's the wider importance of Whitney Houston?
It's a news story.
No, but you're saying more than that. You're saying not just it's a news story, but there's a wider importance which justifies it being at the top of the agenda. Tell me what it is in the Whitney Houston case.
It's her fame. It's the fact that she sold 200 million records. It's the fact that she won many Grammys. It's the fact that she is one of the most famous and most applauded female singers of the late 20th century. She's not just any old singer. She had a profile and a resonance with many audiences which made her death news. And you're right, she'd been struggling with drug problems, but the point at which she died, that came as a big surprise and a big shock. And I would ask listeners, even those who hate sport or hate pop stars, just to bear with us and understand that what we try to do when these stories happen, that we will report them, we will give them a prominence, but only for a while, because we recognise that the job then is to move on and return to, the big long-running stories, that whether Syria or the economy, which actually are what dominate our bulletins and our leads.
Mary Hockaday, head of the BBC's newsroom. How the news agenda is decided and who decides it are issues about which we get a lot of correspondence. So I'll be revisiting the BBC newsroom later in this series to find out more about the decision-making. Do let me know if you have any other questions I can explore while I'm there. Now it's time to find out about the results of the Feedback Radio Swap Challenge. Last week, you may remember, I spoke to Deborah Mole, who's a teacher at Bartley Green School in Birmingham, as she was about to embark on a week of great sacrifice, doing without her beloved 6 Music. Not only that, she had to listen to Radio 1 Extra instead. One of her students, 15-year-old Kevin, promised to do the opposite, giving up the radical, cutting-edge 1 Extra for what he feared was the bland, middle-aged, middle-class 6 Music. How did they get on? Here's some clips from their homemade audio diaries.
Right, day 1, feeling brave, feeling positive. I can do this. 1 Extra, here I come.
First for hot new music. This is BBC Radio 1 Extra.
Right, well, Friday evening, and I've just listened to a really great record by a guy called Ed Sheeran, which, a good start. I quite liked it.
Hello, it's Kev. Radio Swap Day 1. I must admit it's hard going 1 Extra cold turkey. The news is kind of boring. It's not like 1 Extra on Semtex. You know, I missed the rap roundup.
So, Harry Schoss's rap roundup. I did promise Kevin that I would listen to it. And I particularly liked his piece on Harry Redknapp for England manager.
Let me go in a cappella, the fella Capello resign. Everybody saying they want Harry for the job, but I'm too busy dead there. I can't do it, I'm suggesting Redknapp.
I don't think I'd like my news delivered like that all the time. But no, as a little Friday night sort of fun thing, I thought it was very good.
This is BBC Radio 6 Music.
Hello, it's Kev again. It's day 2. I'm at the stage where I'm having 1 Extra drawback to symptoms. Okay, I'll admit now, I went on YouTube and I listened to Childish Gambino. I did kind of cheat.
Friday night, 1 Extra DJ Semtex. Shout out to Cameo holding it down.
It's now Saturday morning, day 2 of the swap, and I have a terrible confession. I fell asleep before DJ Semtex came on. But all is not lost, because apparently what the kids do is they watch radio, and I've been mooching it around on the 1 Extra website. Very slick production, it looks lovely. And there were some really interesting videos. And I think it encourages teenagers and that target audience to become more informed about their choices. For example, Kevin really does know his stuff. He's a little 1 Extra fat goldmine. So what I'll do is I'll catch up with Semtex by listening to it on the iPlayer.
You're alone to yourself. And we don't suffer dreamers.
Why, Miss Mole? Why have you done this to me? And no, I just don't think I can go another day listening to soft indie rock. I am missing my 1 Extra. I'm missing the big dog himself, Tim Westwood. Yeah, so, P.S. to Miss Mole. I hope you're loving the big dog.
In the old days, when I was growing up, they used to have double seats at the back.
Double seats?
Yeah, double seats,
so
baby.
2 people could fit on 1 seat?
Oh, I think it was designed for fat people.
Oh.
But then
I think it's day 4 of the radio swap, and I was listening to Westwood, the big dog. Credit to him, he did actually play a tune that I didn't think I would normally like by Drake and Rihanna. It was more his presentation style. There was more slang and whatever and street speak in it than the younger presenters. So, but I do think that one thing that transcends both 1 Extra and 6 Music is it doesn't really matter the age of the presenter. It's the musical knowledge and the love of music that comes across. So with Westwood, that again, it is there.
Today I woke up and listened to 6 Music. Yeah, I was listening to Namone. I actually enjoyed Bob Marley and the Wailers, Could You Be Loved. And I like Aretha Franklin's Respect. Love that song. R-E-S-P-C-T, find out what it means to me. I'm really enjoying it. I'm actually kind of enjoying this now. Hope Miss Mole is having, the same enjoyable experience as I am.
Ah, such selfless endurance. Are they glad it's all over? Have they changed their minds about anything? They both join me now from the BBC Birmingham studio. Now, Kevin, I was very distressed to hear that you cheated, but what about the teacher, Deborah? Did you feel tempted to cheat at any point?
I must admit a little bit, yeah. I got jumped on by my son and he enforced the rules very sternly. I was quite determined to see it through, though, to set the example. Kevin?
It is hard. It is very hard. Once every 47 songs, a song you like does come on. It is very hard.
But I was struck, Kevin, that you hadn't encountered Aretha Franklin before, and that when you did, you were favourably impressed.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that. And then now it's on my Spotify playlist. I think One Extra do need to embrace the musical genius of Aretha Franklin. So.
And how about, Deborah, the genius or otherwise of the big dog? I got the impression you thought he was trying too hard, really.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan.
Big dog is, of course, Tim Westwood. So, Kevin, do you think that Tim Westwood is acting the part, if you like, where others are just naturally doing it?
I like him because he contrasts with his age, the music that he likes. You would have thought that he would be the one liking Aretha Franklin with his age. But, he likes the music that we like.
But you were talking about the way in which, when you were listening to One Extra, you noticed the number of kids were watching videos at the same time, and that the visualisation of radio has real potential.
I think it's a good thing, it makes them more informed about their choices, and Kevin certainly seems to know his stuff. So
sometimes I'm calm and I want to be a bit more hyperactive and listen to the big dog himself, and just seeing his face on webcam and things like that, and the guests that he has, not virtually talking to them, but just seeing their face and the expressions that they have, you can't exactly see that on radio. Visualisation is good.
Well, Deborah, one final question to you. The average age of the Radio 4 audience hovers just about 50, sometimes goes up to 55. Do you seriously recommend that some should listen to One Extra, and will they survive the shock?
I think you should try everything, really, shouldn't you? And the fact that they're there is really important, to have diversity, particularly in music. So, yeah, definitely give it a go, but certainly check out Six Music as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, both of you. Your week's deprivation is over. You're now free to go back to the music of your choice. Thanks very much for helping us.
Thank you.
And you can see a picture of them both and read Kevin's account of their traumatic experiences on the BBC School Report website. Now, I hope you received a heart-shaped card this week. It doesn't sound as if Edith Kalman did, but I don't think she minds. She's looking for something more soul-stirring.
As Valentine's Day occurs this week, and the happily coupled amongst us are thus amply catered for, could I request a favour for myself and any other ageing spinsters out there? Would you please ask Zeb Soanes to read Byron's poem She Walks in Beauty, or Wilde's Silentium Amoris, or Shelley's Love's Philosophy, or the back of a cornflakes packet, or anything? More Zeb, please, and his chocolate mousse vocals. Thank you. Edith Kalman, Miss, spinster of this parish.
How could we refuse? Zeb, this is your moment. Miss Kalman expects. Time to deliver.
Ingredients: maize, sugar, barley, malt flavouring, salt. Contents may settle during transit. May contain nuts.
Not the most romantic, Zeb. How about trying the feedback contact details?
You can write to Feedback, P.O. Box 67234, London SE1P 4AX, or leave a telephone message on 03333 444 544. Standard landline charges apply, but it could cost more on some mobile networks. Or you can email feedback@bbc.co.uk. You can find all those details on the feedback page of the Radio 4 website.
That's better. I hope that will quench Miss Kalman's desire. However, just in case her ardour is undiminished, we'll have one more crack before the end of the programme. And now for fervour of a different kind. The Moral Maze offers frequently passionate, argumentative, intellectual combat with no prisoners taken. This week's programme tackled the moral, ethical and psychological issues surrounding organ donation. Listener Matt Garner was left aghast and agog by the blunt debating style. There seems to be a pattern emerging here, as there were mixed views about last week's edition as well. It was the first programme in the new series, and the subject was, is the monarchy still a moral force in modern-day Britain? That assumes, of course, that it once was. Catherine Pollock emailed to say that, despite an Ofsted inspection the next day, she was glued to the radio. What a fantastic highlight to the evening. Other listeners, however, thought that the light was rather low.
My name's Catherine Percival. I tuned in expecting to hear a wee bit about the morality of the monarchy, but what I heard was a real disappointment. The snide remarks, the aggression, the unpleasantness, and then the shouting people down, not letting them speak. That is not debate.
And you, with all your campaigning, are not popular and don't have support.
That's not an issue. This is the moral maze. It's about truth. No. I don't court popularity.
It's about whether it's an offence to the people.
You're showing your political background here. This slavish regard.
My name's Coralie Mattis. What seems too often to happen is a bunch of bully boys, and it's mostly the boys, pushing, shoving and trampling their way over every obstacle instead of exploring, questioning and listening.
But in a sense...
And I don't think it's a question of data, it's a moral question. This is a moral maze, isn't it? This is the programme I'm on, I take it.
Absolutely.
My name is Aggie Pinto. I know it is a spirited debate programme, but it sounded like the Spanish Inquisition, and no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. The result was we could not make out anything that the invited guests had to say, which I would have been interested to hear, and possibly is the aim of the programme. Ultimately, it was Meek Michael Burke's role to moderate, which he abjectly failed to do most of the time.
It's the media that makes them celebrities.
So maybe she hasn't got...
Let him finish.
You know as well as I do that somebody goes on a show like Big Brother and all of a sudden they're a celebrity.
Hi, this is Andy from Shetland. Moral Maze is one of those programmes that I can give or take most weeks, but it was absolutely amazing this week. Put a room full of hysterical celebs and guests together and have them shout over the top of each other about whether the monarchy is worthwhile, and it turns into real entertainment. I might even listen to the repeat.
No, not Charles.
Absolutely happy about
not Charles.
We've got to stop it there. Seldom had such a wishy-washy witness.
Michael Burke has been the chairman of the Moral Maze for 22 years. I went to see him in the programme's Spartan production office to ask if every good programme had to have a good punch-up.
It doesn't have to have one good punch-up, but I love it when it does. I suppose a good Moral Maze has got a bit of heat as well as a lot of light, I suppose. It's nice when there's a clash of viewpoints and a decent argument. So long as the vituperation, if you like, doesn't get in the way of some reasonable, real examination of the ethical issue that underpins whichever issue of the day we're dealing with.
And all the witnesses who appear should be on notice. They'll try and ensure they get a fair hearing, but in the end, it's a bit of a fight, and they have to be able to fight.
Yes, I mean, I don't think it's quite as much of an intellectual bear pit as it once was.
And I think David Starkey.
Yes, well, I can remember marvellous exchanges. I remember David Starkey and Paul Johnson, the celebrated, distinguished and quite elderly historian. And Johnson lost his temper and turned to Starkey and said, "You are a horrid little man." And Starkey, quick as a flash, said, "The only things of mine that are smaller than yours are my nose and my liver."
Well, you know that after the Moral Maze on the monarchy as a moral force, there were quite a number of emails which were critical, both of you and Michael Portillo. For example, Catherine Percival. Shame on Michael Portillo for not allowing people to wear their point of view, and shame on Michael Burke for allowing it. And later on, Aji Pantu says, ultimately it was Michael Burke's role to moderate, which he objectively failed to do most of the time. In effect, Moral Maze this week was the Michael Portillo show. Michael Portillo did put his points forcibly, didn't he?
He was actually unusually grumpy. I mean, normally he's the soul of courtesy on the programme, though he doesn't suffer fools gladly. And he was on more robust form than normal.
And in those circumstances, what do you see your role? Do you think you should always protect the witness?
The last thing I should be doing is protecting the witness on the Moral Maze, because the people who are chosen entirely on the basis that they can look after themselves. My role is to, if you like, to hold the ring, and indeed, from that particular listener's point of view, have failed to do what I also should do, which is enable the witness to get a word in edgeways, more than a word in edgeways, to be able to have their point of view. But also, my role is to enable the the panellist or the person interrogating the witness to be able to challenge that point of view. It's not always easy to get the balance right. Sometimes you get it wrong. And what I normally find in these occasions is that the witness feels that they've come off better. Often they do, and when they do come off better in any clash with the panellists, my heart sings.
And the witnesses are brought in live on air into a chair. When they're finished, they're taken out, and there's no attempt to, well, some people might want to do that, but it is a very live experience. You don't afterwards edit it, of course you can't, it's live. Is that important to its success, that it is live?
In my opinion, it's important to its success, because you feel you're on a bit of a tightrope. There's no means of recovery. What's done is done. And I'm afraid institutionally as well, I feel that perhaps we've been enabled to be closer to the edge as a discussion programme than is, how can I put this, common in other parts of the BBC, precisely because there is no opportunity for rafts of the BBC management to go over it and have meetings about it.
Now, you're not retired, Michael, but you're doing less than you did, yet this is a programme that you always want to keep doing, or so I'm told, that it is almost the first thing in your diary at the beginning of the year. Why is that?
I love it because it's a highest common factor programme. You know, if the audience can't keep up, well, there's always Radio 2. It's my postgraduate university course. It's my my London club. It's it's everything. I would like to do it until my organs are ready for transplant.
I'm sure there'll be no lack of demand for your organs, Michael. Drive carefully. So all that's left for us to do in this week's feedback is to make Miss Edith Cullman, spinster of this parish, an even happier lady. This can be accomplished by having her heart's desire, the inimitable Zeb Soanes, read part of Oscar Wilde's Silentium Amoris.
And as at dawn across the level mead on wings impetuous some wind will come, and with its 2 harsh kisses break the reed which was its only instrument of song. So my 2 stormy passions work me wrong, and for excess of love, my love is dumb. But surely unto thee mine eyes did show why I am silent, and my lute unstrung. Else it were better we should part and go, thou to some lips of sweeter melody, and I to nurse the barren memory of unkissed kisses and songs never sung.
Silentium Amoris. I'll have to learn it by heart and see if it works for me. But now it's time to unstring my lute. Goodbye. Gruelling ordeals and surprising discoveries. But first, what is more important than the continuing slaughter in Syria, which has now spread from Homs to Hama? Perhaps the disastrous financial crisis in Greece, which threatens the euro and our hopes of growth? Or the continuing debate over seismic shifts in the NHS? No. Many listeners think BBC News believes the fate of 2 football managers and the death of a pop singer recently more famous for her battle with drugs than her music is much, much more important.
Natalie Donovan has the news.
Thanks, Rog. Good morning. Fabio Capello has quit as England manager 4 months before the start of the Euro 2012 Championship.
I'm Jeff Greenleaf from Kingsworthy, Winchester. The exit of Fabio Capello has been given excessive prominence in the news broadcasts this week. The BBC needs to recover some clear understanding of what is real and important news. The soap opera, which is English football, has no place in the main news broadcast.
This is a download from the BBC. To find out more and for our terms of use, please go to bbc.co.uk. Hello. Is the moral maze going up a blind alley, preferring heat to light? Its chairman, Michael Burke, mounts a staunch defence.
It's nice when there's a clash of viewpoints and a decent argument, so long as the vituperation, if you like, doesn't get in the way of some reasonable, real examination of the ethical issue that underpins whichever issue of the day we're dealing with.
Also in feedback, Radio 4 newsreader Zeb Soanes is about to make a lonely spinster very happy by reading this.
Ingredients: maize, sugar, barley, malt flavouring, salt. Contents may settle during transit.
And would you give up your favourite radio station for a week? We hear from two listeners who have. They tell us about their
changed BBC Radio 5 Live when they decided to abandon Prime Minister's questions for some court case that had come to an end. It was a disgrace. I told them so in 3 or 4 text messages, and I told them I would be phoning complaining to feedback.
The headlines: the American singer and actress Whitney Houston has died in Los Angeles at the age of 48.
Caroline Jackson. I live in Oxfordshire near Abingdon, and they went on and on about it and analysed it from every single angle you could think of.
The BBC News on 5 Live. Police in Los Angeles have confirmed Whitney Houston has died at the age of 48.
I make no bones about the fact that I was looking for an analysis of what was happening in Greece and what was going on in Syria. I think that this was completely an instance of very bad judgment by those in charge of BBC News.
Mary Hockaday is the head of the BBC's newsroom. I asked her why the news about the England football manager's departure and the acquittal of Harry Redknapp on tax fraud charges trumped stories which many of you thought were much more important.
I do recognise that football is just per se a turn-off for some audiences, but if it was literally the resignation of a football manager, I think you'd be absolutely right, not really worthy of the main news at all. But this isn't just any football manager, it is the football manager of the England team, and whether you like it or not, the England team is a national institution. It's big business with masses of followers, and it's wrapped up, for some people, not all, but for many people, with the national identity. Now add to that the reasons for him going, and at that point I believe that this story does connect beyond to wider issues about the society we live in.
But Luke Gray would say, hold on, there's already a sports section in most bulletins where this story surely belongs. How does it rate above the murderous bombardment of Homs, the government's troubles, their health reforms, or yet more?
Let me just bring you up to date on the Harry Redknapp trial. The verdicts are in. Harry Redknapp and Milan Mandaric both found not guilty of tax evasion. We've had all sorts of views in the last hour, not least that Harry Redknapp should be the next England manager.
My name is Mrs. Jury, and I wanted to complain about Radio 5, where the programme was absolutely dominated by news about a football coach who'd been appointed or something, to the neglect of proper news, which was happening all over the world. I don't know if you realise, but half your audience probably couldn't care less about football.
Just waiting for Prime Minister's questions to start. It will be interrupticus, I think. PMQ's interrupted, I think we can expect today.
Well, I think David Cameron and Ed Miliband would have to go some to match the drama of Redknapp and...
My name is Andrew Barclay. I wish to make very strong complaints against